Greetings, natives, and welcome to my podcast, Chemotswan. Today we are discussing the Underground Railroad. This is the latest series by Barry Jenkins. The Underground Railroad is based on a Pulitzer-winning book by Colson Whitehead. I've never read any of the stuff. I have never read any of his books. I didn't even know who the guy was until the series came out. So I wanna go check it out, and I'll probably do it in the next couple coming days. But what I've loved with what Jenkins has done with the Underground Railroad is that he has made it into a mishmash of genres. It's a mash of magic realism. It has touches of horror in the same vein as Get Out and Them. It has touches of a road movie, and all these things, they all blend together to create a very unique story that is told with so much care, and it's performed with heart by the different actors that are involved in the story. The magic realism elements are seen in two ways. They're done through some of the dream sequences that the series comes in with, and it's also done with the railroad. That the railroad is created as a literal metaphor. With magic realism that initially comes from Colombia, it's the idea of taking supernatural elements or fantastical elements and putting them into a realistic context. And then for me, with what they did with the railroad is that it kind of breaks the heaviness of the reality, of reimagining this network of people into an actual railroad with actual conductors, and that was a quite nice touch. The road trip element, you see it in Cora's journey, because she travels through the different states, crossing into the north, and you get to follow her and see the different towns and the different histories of the different towns, and how the different towns relate to blackness. Like in episode 2, you see how the liberal whites are painted by Jenkins, and the story that they are not to be trusted. This idea of people who are trying to civilize the natives, in this case, civilize the slaves, have ulterior motives to a point where they can create an insensitive depiction of having slaves having to perform slavery for the pleasure of white folks. And there's a long history of that in the US, where white America exploits black culture, it exploits black artifice for its own good, and not necessarily for the good of black people. And you look at people like the Beatles, you look at Elvis, you even look at rock and roll and the roots of it. It all comes from black culture, but it was then taken out of black culture and adopted by white folks. All these cultural products that have their roots within blackness, but has benefited white folks and not really necessarily benefited the black people per se. So there's a long history of that, and even the fact that one of the white guys goes and talks about "Fubu for us by us" was a clever line that was thrown in the series, and I really appreciated it. The horror element is there, and currently now in the US, there's been a very interesting move where you're seeing more and more black creators creating horror movies and horror series. You had Get Out, you had Us, we have Them, and then there's a remake of Candyman, but where the horror puts the black experience at the heart of the story. And what is horror? What's horrific is the experience of blackness, and there's nothing as harrowing as slavery to show you how horrific the experience of blackness is in the U.S. Whether it's in the sense of the physical violence and the physical torture, to this idea of people's mental beings being screwed over, especially in episode 2, where people feel like, hey man, maybe you're not thinking right. you're being paranoid that these guys are out to get you, when in actual fact they are out to get you. There's a long history of medicine being used to experimented on black people, and the series touches on that. And yeah, so you have the magic realism, you have the road trip element, and you have this horror element. And it's not just the physical horror, it's even the psychological horror that you also get. Jenkins has taken the series and turned it into a 10 plus hour art house movie, basically. All these things, they all blend together to create a very unique story that is told with so much care, and it's performed with heart by the different actors that are involved in the story. When I look at the movie, the first thing that came to me is that it kind of reminded me of Les Miserables. Oh, my French is terrible, so you can laugh at me. I don't know how to pronounce it, but yes, yes, the one with Jean Valjean and Javert. Yes, that one. Yes, where in Les, the story is you have the poor people who are living in France, and France is not really taking care of the poor people to a point where people have to sell themselves. They sell their thieves to just get by. And there's a story with Javert, who's like this uh, heavily dutiful police officer who's chasing after John Valjean, who's trying to start anew, but this guy won't let him go. And as the society is falling apart, Javert is still on this guy's case, irrespective of all the changes that he's made in his life. This guy won't let it be. And so with the Underground Railroad, you almost have a similar story with Ridgway, played by Joel Edgerton, who is this slave catcher who's hell bent on catching Cora. And just like in Les, the story of John Valjean and Javert is the story of France, and so is the story of Ridgway and Cora is the story of the U.S. and the U.S. and its history when it comes to black people and to racism, to white hegemony, and to the bloody unrecognized chapter of slavery. But like with like all great stories, it's the characters that move the story. It's the characters that we fall in love with. It's the characters that we sympathize with, and it's the characters that reveal all these great narratives and great ideas that are embedded in the story. And yeah, Underground Railroad is filled with characters. It's filled with great characters, leading with our Tusumbedu as Cora. And man, Tuso does a great job. She embodies the character. That small frame that she has and those wide eyes can emote. You feel her pain as she's trying to strive to get some sense of urgency, where someone who's moving from a place of feeling abandoned by her mom and just a piece of property that has not no agency whatsoever, to someone who's now willing to put it all on the line to try and find love, to find freedom, and to dare and try to be herself, and to a point where she even reaches a point where she's like, you know what, for me to live and to be, I might have to get rid of this person who's been an obstacle for my entire life. And it's amazing to watch. And then you have the character of Homer, who's Ridgway's little black helper, who's a long staple character of black folks helping white folks because they're indebted to the white folks in one way or the other. And for me, Homer represents that black guys who believe in the benevolence of the oppressors, and they don't even see that they're being oppressed. And yeah, he's a heartbreaking character, but he's well played by the young chap. And then you have Ridgway by Joel Edgerton, who's the Australian has come far, since he broke into the US, and he is like Valjean, and he is determined in bringing in Cora, but he is not as honorable as Valjean. He is very flawed in many ways, and I appreciate the fact that the series even gives us a chance to do a backstory on this antagonist, so we get to understand him and he's thinking a little bit better. But understanding him doesn't necessarily make us sympathize with him, but it just goes to show us the depths of his depravity. And I think kudos needs to be given to Barry Jenkins, because he could have just made this movie to be as commercial and as accessible as possible, but he is making his movie his way. He takes detours when he needs to take detours. He pauses the story when he needs to pause the story. He throws in flashes of expressionism when he wants to do it, to tell the story that he wants to tell in the way that he wants to tell it. And yeah, and kudos should be given to Amazon for for having the sense to say, hey man, here's our money, do this thing, man. And I believe come the Emmys, come the Golden Globes next year, Tusombedu, Barry Jenkins, and the rest of these guys are going to clean up big time. Anyway, so I really loved the series. I thought it is heavy. Yes, it's heavy, but it's so succinct and in what it's doing. And for me, it's breaking down white hegemony. It's breaking down why the US is as bad as it is right now. And it all goes back to this whole idea of white people seeing that they have a right over blackness, and the fact that America has never really dealt with its slave chapter and its slave history and its slave legacy. And even within the African Americans, the issues of slavery still lingers. And I think like someone like Cora and the issue that she has with thinking that her mom has abandoned her, while in actual fact the mom was fleeing the same thing that she was fleeing. And I don't want to really spoil it that much, because I thought it was a lovely chapter, and I think it was a lovely thing that it's left for the last episode, where you actually get to understand what really happened to Mabel, who's Cora's mother. Kind of makes me think about how African Americans probably have a long history of trauma that has come through slavery that also needs to be dealt with. But at the heart of it, though, it is this thing around whiteness and white hegemony. And episode 9 really crystallizes it, how bad white hegemony has been for blackness. It's not just bad in the sense that it's cultural appropriation, and it's easy for people to take what is black and create and take it and make it for themselves, but it's the idea that white hegemony can never let blackness prosper, can never let blackness thrive, can never let blackness be or appreciate blackness for it to be seen as human and as normal as the next person. And I think like episode 9 and the episodes around the wine farms really bring that home, and including actually Cora's journey shows you that one of the biggest problems with the US has been white identity, and how white identity defines itself, and how it won't allow blackness be. And if you like this, please subscribe. I will be doing more reviews, and I will also be doing essays on South African film and television. And yeah, so this is my first. There'll be more. It'll get better. And if you like what you see, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Sharp, sharp.